The old, sprawling estate was a kingdom of tangled ivy and forgotten stone, where the air always felt heavy with the scent of damp earth and aging oak. Simon moved through the garden with a slow, deliberate limp, his hands calloused and stained with the dark soil he tended to every day. He was a man of few words, a former firefighter whose lungs had been scarred by a rescue mission gone wrong years ago, forcing him into a life of quiet isolation. To the residents of the wealthy neighborhood, he was just a bent figure in the shadows, a nameless gardener who kept the hedges straight and the flowers blooming. They never saw the metals tucked away in his small, modest cottage or the sharp, observant eyes that missed nothing. Simon found peace in the silence of the plants, but he never truly lost the instinct of a protector, the part of him that was always listening for a cry for help amidst the rustling leaves of the ancient trees. One humid afternoon, while Simon was pruning the roses near the grand iron gates, the silence was shattered by the screech of tires and the harsh sound of raised voices. A luxury car had pulled into the driveway, and a man in an expensive suit was shouting at a young woman who looked incredibly small against the backdrop of the massive stone pillars. The man's face was twisted with a cold, predatory arrogance as he grabbed her arm, his voice dripping with threats about a legal dispute and her supposed helplessness. The woman, Leila, tried to pull away, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. But she was trapped between the man and the heavy doors of the mansion. The other staff members quickly looked away, pretending to be busy to avoid the wrath of a man who clearly had immense influence. But Simon didn't look away. He felt the old fire of justice stirring in his chest, a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. He dropped his shears and walked toward the confrontation, his limp more pronounced but his posture as straight as a soldier's. He stepped between the aggressive man and Leila, his presence acting like a sudden, impenetrable wall. "The lady asked you to let go," Simon said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that carried the weight of years of authority. The man in the suit let out a sharp, mocking laugh, looking at Simon's dirt-stained clothes and worn-out boots with pure contempt. "You're the help, old man. Get back to your dirt before I make sure you're sleeping on the streets by tonight. You have no idea who you're talking to." Simon didn't move an inch. He looked the man directly in the eye, his gaze steady and unshakable. He had faced walls of flame that reached the ceiling. A bully in a designer suit was nothing more than a passing shadow. He quietly reached for his phone and began recording, his silence more terrifying than any shout. "I know exactly who I am talking to," Simon replied, his tone as cold as winter stone. "I am talking to a man who is trespassing and committing assault. If you don't release her and leave this property in the next 10 seconds, the local authorities will have this video, and your reputation will be the first thing that burns." The man's face turned a deep, ugly shade of red, but as he looked at the calm, fearless gardener, he realized that he couldn't win this battle. With a final, whispered threat, he released Leila's arm and stormed back to his car, the engine roaring as he sped away from the estate. Leila stood there, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her hand covering the red marks on her wrist. She looked at Simon, her eyes filled with a profound gratitude that she couldn't yet put into words. Simon simply gave her a small, respectful nod and returned to his roses, picking up his shears as if nothing had happened. Simon spent the evening in his small cottage, expecting a phone call telling him he was fired. He knew that the man he had confronted was a powerful developer with ties to the estate's board, and a humble gardener was an easy target for revenge. He sat by the window, watching the moonlight filter through the trees, feeling a strange sense of relief. He had protected someone today, and that was worth more than any job security. However, the call never came. Instead, the next morning, a driver in a dark suit arrived at his door, requesting his presence at the main house for an urgent meeting. Simon straightened his worn shirt, brushed the dust from his trousers, and walked toward the grand mansion, prepared for the worst. He entered the massive library, where the sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the thousands of books that lined the walls like silent witnesses to history. To his absolute shock, The woman from the driveway was sitting behind the massive mahogany desk, looking elegant and entirely in control. She rose to her feet and walked toward him, a warm smile replacing the fear he had seen the day before. "My name is Leila Sterling," she said, extending her hand. "I am the new owner of this estate and the CEO of the Sterling Foundation. I was visiting the property anonymously to assess the staff and the grounds before moving in." She explained that the man from the day before was a corrupt executive who had been trying to intimidate her into selling the land. Everyone else turned their backs. She continued, her voice soft but firm. "Only you stood up for me, knowing you had everything to lose and nothing to gain. That is a rare kind of courage, Simon. It is the kind of courage that defines a true leader, regardless of the clothes they wear or the job they do." Leila didn't just keep Simon on as a gardener. She offered him a life-changing opportunity. She appointed him as the director of estate operations and the head of her new veterans support charity. "I've read your file, Simon. I know about your time as a firefighter and the lives you saved before your injury," she told him. "You've spent enough time in the shadows. I want you to help me build something that protects people on a larger scale." Simon was speechless, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a gentle hand. He realized that his life of quiet service had led him to this exact point, where his integrity had finally been recognized by someone who valued the soul more than the status. He accepted the role, and within months, the neglected garden was transformed into a sanctuary, and the estate became a beacon of hope for hundreds of people who had been forgotten by the world. The final chapter of Simon's story finds him standing on the balcony of the restored mansion, looking out over the flourishing gardens he once tended alone. He no longer wears the stained overalls of a gardener, but a sharp, professional suit that reflects his new authority. Beside him, Leila watches the sunset, the two of them having formed a bond built on mutual respect and a shared mission to do good. Simon's limp is still there, a reminder of his past sacrifices, but his heart is full, and his lungs feel stronger with every breath of the clean, crisp air. He realized that the gray dust of his old life had been blown away, replaced by a vibrant future where he was no longer invisible. He had proven that a hero is never truly retired. They are simply waiting for the moment when their light is needed most. As the stars began to twinkle over the estate, Simon smiled, knowing he was finally home and that his journey had only just begun.